Dear friends of the Women's Voices Summit, it gives me great pleasure to address all of you and to recognize the remarkable leadership of Secretary Clinton and Chelsea Clinton in bringing us together to empower girls and women across the globe. This October, the Republic of Kosovo hosted the very first International Forum on Women, Peace and Security. This forum is part of our commitments for President Biden's Summit for Democracy, but most importantly, it is a confirmation of our steadfast determination to amplify the voices of women, strengthen women's participation in all walks of life, and to ensure that we have a gender balance in decision-making processes of peace and security in Kosovo as well as around the world. The participants at this year's forum spoke unanimously and clearly. There can be sustainable peace only when there is equal and equitable participation of women in conflict prevention, peacemaking, peacekeeping, as well as processes of relief, recovery, and reconciliation. The women of Ukraine, just like the women of Kosovo back in 1999, are showcasing the most remarkable resilience, even in times of war. It is their strength and the determination to protect peace and democracy in the face of tyranny and autocracy that reminds us all about the necessity and paramount importance of gender-inclusive participation for sustainable peace. Today, I want to take this opportunity to call on all women and men alike to act, to speak up, to empower and support the voices, the courage, and the vision of girls and women around the world who are ready, willing, and capable of building a safer and more peaceful world for all of us. Together, we must continue to speak up and, crucially, to act. Not only do we owe this to ourselves, but to the many women and girls who do not have the opportunity nor the platform to do so. We must ensure that their calls are heard and then acted upon. We lead through action, but we also lead by example, because our democracies are stronger and more sustainable when women are involved and treated as equals, and especially when women lead.
How was lunch? Good, right? So good. Remember how I told you at the beginning of the day about the magic of this room, right? And how throughout the hours, you would start to feel even more inspired and motivated, more grounded, with more purpose. Are you feeling that? Yes. Yeah, good. Part of that, obviously, is taking note of the call to actions that our speakers are telling us, no? And so the way this works, obviously, I don't have to tell you all, is we have to take action. So just a quick reminder that you can do that. One of the ways to do that is by simply scanning the QR code that's located on your program. And you can also visit clintonfoundation.org/women's voices and pledge to take action. So that, a quick note there. We're gonna get right back into it. We've talked about a lot of different things, and the next topic is the economy, no? And women voices in the economy. So far, we've talked about our achievements, we've talked about history, about the past, and we've also talked about the way that these systems and forces are failing us. No, they're failing us even though women are the backbone of the economy, and even though women are very much the safety nets of this democracy. In order to have a strong economy, we know, what do we need? Like complete and full participation of everyone, and we're not there yet. I always think about something that Monica Ramirez tells us every day. You're about to hear from Monica. She reminds us, all Latinas that work closely to her, that Latinas are still only making 54 cents on average per the $1 that a white man makes. No, so we will not stop fighting until we close that gap, and that's exactly what you're about to hear today. No, a conversation that talks about the women that are fighting to close that gap every single day. It is being led by Jen Klein. She's a very, very special person in this space, in the country. She is, yes, she's the assistant to the president and director of the White House Gender Policy Council, but she's also, more than anything, a longtime Hillary Land, leader. So let's welcome her, please. Jen, thank you, Jen. She is a celebrity. She's going to be leading the conversation with REEMA NANAVATY. She's self-employed, Women's Association of India. Thank you, REEMA. Also, Jennifer Hyman, the CEO and co-founder of Rent the Runway. Amy Tu, President, International, and Chief Administrative Officer of Tyson Foods. And of course, one of my mentors, Monica Ramirez. She's the founder and president of Justice for Migrant Women and the co-founder of the Latinx House. Thank you all. Enjoy.
Thank you. I am so honored to be here with this group of panelists who are working every day on women's economic security in the United States and around the world. I wanted to just start with a little bit of a frame, which is that I had the privilege of working with Secretary Clinton when she was First Lady, and we worked on many of these issues. And back then, people called childcare and equal pay and family and medical leave women's issues, which of course they are. But what she continued to remind everyone and make the case very clearly was that they were also economic issues, which finally everybody else seems to have come to her place and have absorbed. And that investing in women not only benefits women, but it also benefits economies, communities, countries, and in fact, the global economy. So you are all part of the work on women's economic security in various different ways. I'm actually going to start with you, Monica. You founded Justice for Migrant Women, which works to bring the issues of migrant women to the forefront of national conversation through education, through public awareness and advocacy. I think your constituency is now nearly 1 million farm worker women and their families of the 2.5 to 3 million US farm workers. As we will hear more about, many are undocumented or have temporary work visas. So can you just start by telling us what some of the issues are that are facing farm workers right now across the country?
Thank you. It's really an honor to be here. I was saying earlier, this room is pure magic. So thank you for the opportunity to bring my community, the farm worker community, into this space. I'm the daughter and granddaughter of migrant farm workers, and unfortunately, many of the issues that faced my family for decades and farm workers all around the country for decades are still problems that persist today. So for farm workers generally, poor pay, poor housing, exposure to dangerous chemicals, exposure to dangerous working conditions, those are long-standing problems in our country. And for farm worker women, the close to 1 million women whose interests we represent and who we serve, the issue of sexual harassment is one of major concern. So for farm worker women across our country, sexual harassment is an endemic problem. It is rampant. There have only been 2 studies that have been done in our nation to give us a clearer picture about what that looks like. In the late 1980s, a study was published out of California that shed light on the fact that about 90% of the women who were interviewed said that sexual harassment was a major workplace problem. When you have 90% of a workforce saying that sexual harassment is a major workplace problem, we know that we have a real crisis on our hands. And so many of us have been organizing for a long time to address that issue. And in 2010, a second report was issued, and that survey told us that 80% of the women who were surveyed said that sexual harassment was a major problem. So when you take exposure to pesticides, poor pay, poor housing, rampant sexual harassment, dangerous working conditions every single day, instability, the fact that more than half of our farm workers in our country are undocumented, and the fact that perpetrators are using lack of English-speaking resources and information, this poverty, the isolation, all of these things are being used as weapons against farm worker women across our country, unfortunately still today.
And can you talk a little bit about the Bandana Project?
Yeah. So while that is a grim reality that I just shared with you, farm worker women across our country have a lot of power, as you all know. Not only do they feed us every single day, like they just helped feed us a little while ago, farm worker women have been raising awareness and making all the necessary moves to change things so that sexual harassment won't be a widespread problem any longer. And one of the ways that I've helped to organize around this particular issue is by creating a project called the Bandana Project. Farm worker women and farm workers generally wear bandanas while working in the fields to limit exposure to things like pesticides and dust and other things. But for farm worker women, they often use their clothes to help, protect them from unwanted sexual attention. And the bandana is one of the things that is used to obscure the fact that they're women. And so around 2006, it was clear that we had to do something that was going to draw public awareness to this issue, and in particular, to send a message to the perpetrators that we were not going to allow this problem to continue. So we created the Bandana Project, in which we invite people now all around the world to decorate white bandanas to show their support for farm worker women and to send a message to the perpetrators that farm worker women are not alone, that we are with them, and that we're going to continue to fight until this problem ends.
And your work, I know, extends far beyond farm workers. And as Paula mentioned, one of the issues that still face Latina women, and you have worked on and been such a force in leading, is equal pay. I'm noting that it is now December, and we are about to mark Latina Equal Pay Day, which is not about equal pay at all. It's about the date until which a Latina has to work to make the same as an average white man. So talk a little bit about that fight, where we are in it, and what do you see as the path forward?
Yeah, so actually in 2022, based on the data from 2020 during the pandemic, if we had not set the date to observe it on December 8th, Latinas actually would have gone a year without even having a payday observance because we're that far behind. The data from 2020 for all Latinas with reported earnings showed a 49-cent to $1 differential. The data from 2021 shows us that for all Latinas with reported earnings, it's 54 cents. And for full-time Latinas working year-round, it's 57 cents to the dollar. No matter how you look at that data, it is bad, bad, bad. And it is, something that is not going to take just one campaign to change. It's work that we have to do over and over and over again every single day to raise awareness about this problem. I always say Latinas don't work half as hard, half as long, and we're not half as skilled, so we shouldn't be paid half as much. So on December 8th, we will call people to action to raise awareness about this issue. And in particular, there are major policies that need to be changed. We need the Paycheck Fairness Act to pass. We need to make sure that pregnant workers have stronger rights, that they get reasonable accommodations. We need to make sure that employers are doing the right thing, whether the law requires it or not. We need employers to be leaders and to put things in place so that people have the opportunity to get the training they need, the opportunities for advancement and the fair pay. So we're pushing for all of these things, but we also need to do the work to make sure that the community, and in particular, my community, the farm worker community, and other immigrant Latinas across the country, we need to make sure that people know their rights, that they have rights, and that there are people who are fighting for those rights. And it's not just fighting for rights for equal pay, but also if they're asking for equal pay, that they shouldn't be retaliated against, and that they have rights against retaliation too. So on December 8th, we'll call attention to this problem. We will not be celebrating anything on December 8th. We are marking the day and our commitment to take action to close this gap.
REEMA, I'm going to turn to you because you represent workers, low-wage workers in India, but face many of the same kinds of situations. As the Self-Employed Women's Association of SEWA, or SEWA, represents 1.9 million women that work to empower poor women working in the informal sector to achieve secure employment. So tell us more about SEWA and what you've done to improve economic security for women and their families in India.
Thank you so much, and namaste to all of you from 2.2 million women workers, all members of SEWA. And the reason I'm here is that we always look forward to learning from the voices around the world. And that is why here today on behalf of our members as well. And the first lesson that I think we have learned from our members is that though injustice, violence, exclusion are common to all women in our society, when we talk about women, we have to talk about women in a specific manner, to listen to their voices. And at Seva, we listen to women's voices in terms of women as workers. That is, women who run their family and also carry out paid or unpaid work to add to the income of their family. So these are all women workers in the informal economy. 93% of the workforce in our country is in the informal sector. And therefore, it is very important to listen to the voices of these women workers in the cities and the villages, and those who are migrating in between as well. My second point, therefore, is that voice itself is important to be heard, but even more important is whose voice is being heard. Where and why voice per se has limited impact. And therefore, what I would really like to emphasize and what we do at Seva is that women workers are equally important, but also important is where their voice is heard. And therefore, it shows that collective, organized voice is more effective than an individual worker's voice. And the voice of women workers must be heard at the marketplace, at the policy forum, where the policies are formulated. And therefore, it is the collective organized strength that we believe in, which helps the women fight poverty. So we at Seva come together as workers, as poor, and as women, no matter what caste, community, or religion we belong to. As you all might be knowing that in our country, it is these castes and religion and community which are used to divide and rule as well. The second lesson that I say, based on 5 decades of organizing, is that poverty is a form of violence with the consent of the society. It snatches away the dignity and the self-respect of the women and women as workers. And therefore, also, organizing is one of the surest ways to fight poverty. When women fight poverty, it brings back the self-respect, the dignity. But along with that organizing, we also need to work on a very holistic approach of asset creation, capacity, leadership capacities, and access to basic social security, which is healthcare, childcare, and nutrition. This then becomes an empowering process for a woman. And today, therefore, we have evolved into a family of economic organizations. So we are like a banyan tree. We have our own bank, which provides access to financial services to the women, asset creation. We have our own green livelihoods company, which helps in just transition. How do women just not be participating in just transition, but lead the process of transition when we all are talking about climate and climate action? How do women lead that process? We have the speaker was talking about farm workers. India has, tremendous amount of farm workers, and we've organized them into their own company. We have our own managers school. The reason being that, the lesson is that women just don't have to be workers or producers, but they also need to be the owners and managers of their own enterprises. And that is why you need a manager's school as well. So I think the lessons that we have is that in order to have economic security, you need to build democratic economic organizations based on the available skill base or the local resources. Nothing has to be free, as poor do not want charity. All they need is enabling environment, policy environment. You need enabling partnerships, and then build a cadre of grassroots managers. And similarly, I think today, when we are having a summit at the global level or at the highest level. I think what is really important is that we need a movement of summits, Secretary Clinton. Why can't there be summits at the village level, at the slum level, at the trade level? This will help amplify the voices of the women at every level. And I say this because women know that productive work is the thread that weaves a society together. Therefore, peace is about restoring balance in a society. We call it women, work, and peace. And that is what is needed for countries like ours and the neighboring countries like Afghanistan and Sri Lanka as well, where SEVA has been actively working.
Thank you. I'm really struck by so many of the issues that you just raised have been exacerbated by COVID-19. So as, you know, in at least two ways, probably more, but, you know, just what comes to mind is, first of all, that women often work in the low-wage, sort of face-to-face jobs, whether that's childcare or farm work or, you know, in the markets, as you said. And also they are the first to have had to have left the workforce for caregiving responsibilities. So, you know, you just wrote about this in the Indian Journal of Labor Economics. So I was wondering if you could talk about, first of all, the pandemic's effect on informal workers, but also as we look toward what will hopefully be an equitable recovery, just give us some of your recommendations.
I think the pandemic brought about three crises together: the health crisis, the economic crisis, as well as the climate crisis in a country like ours. And as a result of that, women were the worst sufferers. And when I say women, I talk about women workers in the informal sector. Some of the studies that were done shows that women not only lost their work and income, the livelihoods, but women were only able to have one meal a day, which is still the case even today. Therefore, a direct effect on the health and nutrition of the women workers and the adolescent girls. 73% of girls are now out of school because of the pandemic. As you know, the incomes have still not stabilized, and therefore the first and the most affected are young girls who are pulled out of school. And so these are some of the effects. And at SEVA, therefore, we strongly believe that if one has to look at how do you rehabilitate or how do you rebuild your economic pathways after the pandemic, is that work is a healer. And in the current pandemic situation, where majority of the informal sector workers their livelihoods have come to a grinding halt, it is very important to focus on rehabilitating the livelihoods of these workers, building their resilience, promoting the local decentralized economies, organizing workers into their own economic enterprises, repurposing the supply chains of worker-owned microenterprises, and handholding these workers to adopt and adapt new technologies. At SEVA, we call this building an economy of nurturance. So you're not building the economy at the cost of somebody else's livelihood. You're not building an economy by investing in factories and in biscuit-making factories or gun-making factories, but investing in women and their families. The other major recommendation, and we feel the answer lies, is promoting decentralized local economies. As our late founder, Ela Bhatt, always said, that if we apply the 100 miles communities principle, that is the 6 basic needs of life, which is food, clothing, shelter, primary healthcare, primary education, and primary financial services. If these can be met at the local village level, we can set in motion a holistic development of the society. It would strengthen the local markets and local skills. Several such local decentralized economies, when overlap, can strengthen a nation's economy which is the need of the hour. And that's an idea, and we must strive to make it work. This is also help in integrating the informal workers at all steps in the supply chain, and thereby distributing the risks and the profits. And a very important aspect, very, very important, and is how do you work on the recovery and building the resilience of the worker-owned enterprises in order to make the 100-mile principle work is accessing to enabling financial mechanisms. And what we at SEVA call it as the Women's Livelihood and Climate Resilience Fund. The fund is to provide the informal workers with immediate support to recover and stabilize, and prevent the debt trap and allow women to hedge risks. And I say this because in the end, let me reiterate that women build peace because work gives people roots, work builds communities, and work gives meaning and dignity to a woman's life. A woman is a worker, a provider, a caretaker, an educator, and a networker. She's a forger of bonds, and she's a creator and a preserver. And that is what I think we in our region need to focus, therefore, that how do women lead the development of new economic pathways, building an economy of nurturance. Thank you.
I was going to say I'm going to shift gears, but in some sense it's not shifting gears at all because so many of the issues you just raised, both of you actually, are really present in all parts of the economy. But Amy, I'm going to turn to you now. You've been in leadership roles, obviously now at Tyson's, but before that at the Boeing Company. And while representation of women in the C-suite has increased, even since 2015, we still have work to do. According to McKinsey, I think it's 1 in 4 women, 4 C-suite leaders is a woman, and only 1 in 20 is a woman of color. So tell us a little bit about the challenges that you've faced in your position of leadership and on your path to that position of leadership, and also how you think your leadership shapes the company that you work for.
Okay, I think this is going to take 2 or 3 weeks to talk about.
How much time do you have?
Okay. Well, thank you for having me here. Thank you, Secretary Clinton, because I grew up in Arkansas, and it was, we didn't have a lot of money. And my brother's disabled. My mother worked at Sears. My father was a professor. But there was a certain person who's in this room who was the First Lady of Arkansas. And as I was applying to colleges and receiving the acceptance letters, I received a phone call, and it was from Secretary Clinton. And I always will remember that phone call because it was a nudge. She said, just try it. It's a fantastic school. Explore. Get out of Arkansas. You're going to love it. My mother was behind that too. She's like, you need to go, right? You need to go explore the world. So I credit Secretary Clinton because the college that I went to is the same college that she attended. And it's a women's college in Boston, outside of Boston. 2,200 women, and you know, I was, oh my gosh, I love co-ed, I love cheerleading, and this was going to be a new experience, and it was, because what I learned at Wellesley College was that I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to make my mark on the world, but in order to do that, I realized that I needed to excel and also progress through corporations. That's just the area that I chose. It's the area that I love and am passionate about. So taking Secretary Clinton's strength and power, even as she was the First Lady here in Arkansas, I journeyed through investment banking, through retail, through luxury retail, through aerospace and defense, and now in food production. And I had so many experiences. But all of those experiences, there were challenges. There were challenges to progress in the organization to leadership. And what I'm going to share with you is something that's very personal to me, because I know that women have to work harder. We know there's studies out there that say women have to work much harder to progress in a corporate organization. You have to build networks. You have to find creative ways to get your voice heard in a boardroom. But I thought I had all of those pieces completed. I had my networks in the organization. I had taken every lateral opportunity in the organization. I had executive sponsorship, 3 or 4 of the executive leaders. And so I said, this is it. My time has come. And I remember that as I was waiting to hear whether or not I would be in a leadership position at this company, my husband said, let's take a vacation. We're going to Martinique. And I said, great, let's go to Martinique. And I don't know if any of you have been to Martinique, but they're famous for their rum. So we're on vacation, we're having a lovely dinner. I believe it was probably the day before New Year's, and I received a phone call. And this phone call wasn't from the executive sponsor, it was from some random person in the HR department who said, I'm sorry you didn't get the job. And I said, what? What do you mean? I've done all these things. I did exactly what I was supposed to do. I did everything that I was, that was given to me as feedback. And they said, we're sorry, we just decided to go with someone else. So I called my executive sponsors and I said, why did I not get this job? And they just said, there's nothing I can do. It was sorry. And it went to a man. And that leadership ended up being primarily men. There was one woman, and I was supremely disappointed. But it's not the challenge itself, it's what you do after you face those challenges. And so what I did after drinking way too much rum with my husband, and also, way too much crying, my husband said, you need to pick yourself up, put a plan together, and work this as a project. You're gonna continue on. You're going to survive this challenge. And so I code-named my project, Project Rum Punch. And look, it's a project. You have to work it. You have to make sure that everything you do is purposeful to get to the end goal. And as I said, I wanted to make a difference. I wanted to be in leadership. It finally paid off. And I'm very lucky to be here in Arkansas at Tyson Foods. The company gave me an opportunity to be the chief legal officer because that's a long story, I headed into law. But the fact is I was given an opportunity, and now that I have that opportunity, Jen, I have to use my voice. And so I just want to pick up on a topic that came up in the last session, which is around the Dobbs decision. And I'll tell you that I do not have children. I have 2 beautiful kittens, but I do not have children. So I do not know what it's like to be a mother. But what I do know is that when the Dobbs decision came down and the trigger laws were implemented here in the state of Arkansas, I could not sit back. Many of our workers are in states that are ruby red, as it was called. And I knew that I would have to bring this issue up to our executive team. That executive team was not talking about this issue. I decided I was going to lead on this issue, but I knew it was going to be a tricky conversation because we know this is a passionate issue for many people. So creatively, I said, this is not about abortion. This is about women's rights. It's access to services, access to health services. So I prepared for the meeting. I raised it at our executive meeting without going into all of the details. It was really interesting because some people found it really difficult to talk about. Some people wanted to put it on the side and said, we're not going to talk about that issue. Some people said, this is a political issue. Why should we talk about this? And I kept coming back with my colleagues who were women, and I said, this is an issue about access to health services. Yesterday they had it, today they don't. So what are we gonna do? That was a grueling 4-hour discussion, grueling. And the men finally started to come around the corner. One of them said, maybe I should be looking at this as a woman. Bingo, right? But I think at the end of the day, we ended up with a great result, but it was not without effort, it was not without care, and it was not without a plan. So, Jen, I think as I reflect on this, it's just getting into a leadership position. Now it's our time to help drive some of these issues in corporations.
I have two things to say. The first is that Secretary Clinton was right to push you because you were as great as she knew you would be. And second of all, if we ever wondered why having women in positions of leadership mattered, there is your answer. Jen.
Hi.
Hi, I'm going to turn to you next. The World Economic Forum reports that the number of female entrepreneurs is increasing around the world, including here in the United States. Women started 49% of new businesses in 2021, which is up from 28% in 2019, and that is actually a big increase, obviously. Yet, women still face many challenges starting their own businesses. You and I started to talk about this, including unequal access to funding, lack of mentorship. Tell us some of the challenges that you ran into when you started Rent the Runway and how you have made it your cause to help others surmount those barriers.
So I came up with the idea for my company 14 years ago, launched it 13 years ago. At the time, 2% of all funding in the United States was going towards women. 13 years later, now 2% of all funding is going towards women. The stats that you just gave around the percentage of people who start their own companies, that's very true. Half of companies are started by women because women want to be entrepreneurs and have great ideas equally to men. The issue is that because so little capital is provided to women, when you look at companies that have been able to grow and to be successful, you get to a point where you have 1 or 2% of those entrepreneurs who start off as women are actually able to build sustainable companies. Now, why is it that we're in 2022 and we're dealing with a number as stark as 2% of funding going to women, especially in a country like the United States? Well, first, if I had the answer, I would be in a much more successful place in my life. But one of the answers is that the sources of capital in the country are primarily and predominantly run by men. So there are not women at these organizations at all in some cases. In other cases, there is a token woman there who doesn't have much power. So what does that mean as an entrepreneur? Well, you come in to a venture capital firm or a growth equity firm to raise money. You're allotted an hour of time to pitch. And in some cases, your product, let's say, has a female consumer as the end consumer. So for the majority of the last 13 years where I have kind of pitched my business, I've had to spend 20 to 30 minutes of that session explaining why any woman would want to rent clothes or why any woman wants to have variety in her wardrobe. So I have to actually justify why I'm even there in 50% of the time, when I could have been using the time more effectively to talk about my financials, to talk about my plans for growth, my plans for profitability. Harvard Business Review did a study that showed that when women go to raise money, 90% of the time they're asked questions about what are the downside scenarios? How are you going to prevent and care for all of the things that could go wrong? When men go to the same group of people to raise money, they are 90% of the time asked about what are all the upside scenarios? What are all the ways that this could become a multi-billion-dollar business and you can win? And so these are just some of the obstacles that
are there. I personally think after 13 years of doing this, that the only way to change the situation is to get more women into a position of, number one, being able to fund, so more women in finance, in financial organizations who are making these decisions. And I think you need more women who actually have the ability to generate and create wealth, because wealth is power in this country. If you think about who is elected in this country, it's based to a large degree around how much money are they able to raise. And if more women had more money to put behind the causes and the people that mattered to them, we might be in a very different situation. So wealth creation amongst women and women becoming CEOs, being able to run their own businesses. Most wealth creation in this country has actually come from entrepreneurship. Look at who the wealthiest people globally are, but particularly in the United States, those are people that have created their own businesses. So this is a very systemic issue. Now, one of the things that I also think is a component to this is more women sitting on corporate boards. So I've had the privilege over the last 10 years to chair my own board, but also to sit on two much larger public company boards. One is Estee Lauder, another is Zalando, which is an e-commerce company based in Europe. The job of a board fundamentally is, beyond governance, is just one thing: CEO succession. You're in the job of determining who the next leader of that company is going to be. And if more women are sitting in the room to make those decisions, then more women will be considered for top roles at those companies where major decisions are being made. And I do think that having female CEOs is incredibly important, because you know what? At Rent the Runway, it was never even a question that we would equalize benefits amongst our salaried and our hourly employees. So everyone who works in one of my warehouses all over the country has the exact same access to paid leave and bereavement leave and paid family sick leave as I have, whether you are a man or a woman. It was never even a question then when the Dobbs decision came out that we immediately stood up that morning at the company to announce that anyone in one of our facilities in red states who had to ever want to access abortion, want to have an abortion, that we would pay for all of their travel expenses, for any out-of-pocket healthcare expenses. It wasn't even a conversation. It literally took us 10 seconds as a company to determine that we were going to do this. So it's not enough to have one woman, two women in a corporate suite. We need to have 50% of that corporate suite be filled with women. We need 50% of the women who are generating wealth to be women. And it is so difficult to fix these systemic problems. I feel like I started my business in a time when there was a lot of hope. A lot of women around the same time as me started companies and were getting funded. And there were all of these articles that were coming out in Fortune and Forbes about the next generation of female entrepreneurs. And I now look around me, and whereas there might have been 25 of us 10 years ago who started our businesses, there's only 2 of us left now who continue to run our companies. The other 20-some women have been let go, have decided not to continue, have decided that being harassed and assaulted constantly in the media for being toxic or for being, I won't use words, the words that they're called, but was too much for them. We're in a worse situation in many ways now than we were beforehand. And I think that the one power we do have is we have the power of where to spend our money. Women control 85% of all household purchases in this country. You are making decisions for your family on how to spend money. So where we spend our money, what companies we choose to spend our money with, is probably one of the most serious decisions you can make. I think having more knowledge about what those companies stand for, what their values are, which companies have women in their corporate suites? Which companies are run by women? Which companies are providing paid care and paid leave to their employees? Which companies are treating their employees with respect? That's where we should spend our money, because I genuinely don't think there's a simple answer to say, okay, well, 50% of all public and private equity firms should be run by women. That's going to take generations to do. But the thing that we can do quickly is determine which companies we spend our money with and which companies we don't.
I think that magic is going to happen again. We have a question from Macy Sue at Vanderbilt University, who's the president of the Women in Government Club. And this is for any or all of you.
Hi, I'm Macy Sue. I'm a junior here at Vanderbilt University in Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm the president of Women in Government. And my question for you today is, what can we do as college students, and specifically as women of color, to uplift the voices of fellow women in our community and ensure that we're playing a leading role in our economy, both nationally and globally? Thank you.
One thing that I would say is that to dream big for your life and to continue to go at it. If I had stopped at the 99th firm that had said, no way, I will never give you money for your project to wear pretty dresses, which is what I was kind of accused of when I started pitching. That was the rationale. A lot of investors are like, oh, you're going to have so much fun having this big closet and lots of things to wear. If I had viewed that as being an obstacle, I wouldn't be sitting here today as only the 30th woman in history to take her company public. Like, there will be a massive amount of obstacles put in front of women, and particularly women of color. And I think we all just need to keep on pushing through those obstacles and realizing that, like, our resilience is our most fundamental and most precious asset.
Could I just build on that? So, and then what I would say is, whatever age, college or my age, we should also pull women forward. Mm-hmm. We need to help make sure that we can fill that boardroom with women, or the CEOs with women. But that takes time and that takes effort. And so just women hand in hand partnering and pulling forward is what I would say.
I agree. I think we have to continue to champion each other. We have to lift each other up over and over and over again, whether we're in the same organization or company or in other spaces. I also firmly believe that every single day we are doing the work to build the world of our dreams. And part of building the world of our dreams is ensuring that as conscious consumers, we are putting our dollars towards businesses that are doing the right thing by their workforce, including the women who are working in their businesses.
And I think finally I would like to say that, no work is unproductive. So I think we need to value all work that women are doing, and that's will help in lifting women and make them feel that, they are contributing to the economy.
Okay, one more question, which is a call to action. Lightning round, let's start with you, Monica.
There are more than 30 million Latinas across our country. On December 8th and every single day, we need you to raise your voices, to link arms with us, and to call for equal pay for Latinas. 54 cents to the dollar does not make sense. Go to Justice for Migrant Women's website, which is www.justiceforwomen.org/Latina Equal Pay, to find out how you can get involved. We need you to be with us. This is not our problem to solve alone.
We need to work together to create a more equal world. And that will take leadership, it will take engagement, and it will take purposeful action by courageous women and men. So I would say, make sure you stand up, you speak up, and you show up. Make your voice heard.
There is an amazing organization that one of my investors founded called All Raise, which is focused on getting more funding to female entrepreneurs. It's focused on getting more capital and places, private equity and public equity firms, to actually have an equivalent number of female investors and partners. And they're also focused on getting more women onto boards. So I think supporting their work, it's clearly a top-down organization. It's focused on, you know, the top, but I think that having more female in leadership positions does actually positively impact all women.
I think post-pandemic, I think let us all work on building an economy which is a nurturing economy, and also setting up a global women's livelihood and climate resilience fund. And that's what I think the poor and the informal sector women workers need. And I just cannot end by bringing hope into this room on behalf of all our sisters. And Secretary Clinton and Milan, you may recognize what I'm trying to say, and that is just in one line. Ame par karishu, ame par karishu, ame par karishu ek din, oh antarma. Amne che vishwas, we shall overcome someday.
And I think we all agree that is the perfect place to end. So thank you all, and onward.